that basically we took all that list of things that would be in the key characteristics that we went over, and you have a section for that in each one of these forms. And that's why we built this exercise this way, just because that's the way you want to think through it. Deanne was talking to this group over here about, you know, for the action plan, she wouldn't have that as a breakout over here. It would just be within the action plan how we're going to monitor and measure our results. You know, so, and that's okay. I mean, you don't want to create extra work when you implement. So this is not the path to implementation in using this form. It's just to help you systematically think through what has to go into the measurement plan and what you need to consider for in satisfying the requirements of 4.6.1. So we're going to go through these. I'm pulled up the measurement plan we did at the Marine Corps Air Station. I'll show you that one, and you'll see a little bit different, a more applied approach to how we interpreted that for that implementation, and you can see that. So the first section, if you didn't notice, you know, each section started with the label of the key characteristics. So this is our energy sources. We're only worried about the gas for the spray dryers. I told you that by definition for this exercise. So where does the energy source data come from for our gas, since that's what we're worried about for the spray dryer? Where does it come from?
Well, the dryers themselves are something, but coming in over the boundary.
Right, this is the utility, this is the source, right? Comes from the utility meter from Southern Natural Gas or Atlanta Gas Light or whoever, El Paso Energy or whoever they are this week. We asked how often will it be monitored or measured. Evidently, this person thought that maintenance was going out there and reading the meter every week. That's not uncommon. I know companies who will take their own meter readings weekly off of the utility meters, and then they double check the utility against that when they get the bill. But they also log it. You know, they don't do much with it. They could do some really interesting stuff.
You can, I guess, since similar to they have some meters on each dryer, they can just put the transmitter, pulse transmitter to it, then just hook it up to the computer.
Yeah. But for this case, what we're saying is the energy source for the gas in the spray dryers comes through this meter. That's what we're trying to identify here. So, did you put the utility meter here, or did you drop back to the sub meter?
I put it from here.
Because, yeah, see, that it's probably going to drive it up here for this. Here's where the author of the answer key chose to identify the fact that the spray dryers have their own meters. Here's how we're going to determine individual performance, and this will show up again on that EMPI, right? So consumption from our spray dryers. What did you put here? If you put the sub meters at that first section, what did you put here?
Yeah, we put the both the 4 meter and some meter for the gas.
Okay.
And we also put the moisture content.
Or a lot of times in that industry, it's actually measured as a concentration or the solids.
Yeah.
They're measuring the solids concentration, not the moisture concentration. So it's be 30% solids or 40% solids in the slurry, which is 60% water.
Okay.
That's how industry would refer to it, but did any of you put the product flow rate?
Yeah.
So we put it in the next section.
Yeah, that's right.
That we did.
I can understand that. And then, of course, the rest of this you just have to make up, right? You just have to assume, well, if that was my spray dryer, this is how often I belong. Or, you know, this is how I'd analyze it. Did you have anything interesting there to report, anything?
I like that. But
So they're using a plot.
We weren't that far at this stage.
Well, probably, we don't say what kind of flow meter that is. Typically in slurries, they would use an ultrasonic. If you're not familiar with those, the probes go on the outside of the pipe and they send a sound wave through the pipe and they use the Doppler effect to then measure the velocity of the fluid. If they know the density, the solids concentration, and the diameter of the pipe, then they can, that is an automatic calculation of mass flow rate.
How do they know the density?
Well, if you know the solids concentration,
And
How do we measure the
at what
solids?
point in the study was that measured?
in the real industry, there's a lot of process instrumentation. This is a very
I
simplified.
figured, I just wasn't sure where.
So we have a kind of specialized meter to measure the solids content?
Well, I don't know that it's specialized. I don't know how they do it or how they do it. I mean, that's a routine measurement for a lot of industries where they're working with slurries. But I can, as I told you in the slides, pretty much a gas flow meter is going to require recalibration. And there aren't any slurry flow meters I can think of. If you had a mechanical meter with a wheel or something in it, even an ultrasonic one has to be recalibrated at some point. And it's just an appreciation, I guess, for that. We're not asking you to be a meter expert. Then we got to the variables. We decided ambient temperature. Here's that flow meter again. Future use and consumption for our SEUs would be, really comes from the production forecast, right? So this is how much we're expecting to run next month. They have to do that to schedule manpower and labor. They have to analyze their stockpiles and inventories of payola. There's a whole lot that goes on in the scheduling of that they would have a production schedule that they would know. And that this identifies that, what we would expect the run's going to come out of this forecast that's we don't see where that comes from so much. It said production forecast. It'd be nice if we actually listed position or department that produced that. Here's where did everybody get both the product flow meter and the gas flow meter for this? Yeah, okay, good. That's the main point of this. This is a little redundant with that other row that we had for current performance for the SEU. So this probably was my biggest complaint with what we asked you to do, really, is this is an action plan. I can understand, how we're going to evaluate or that there might be things that we would monitor or measure to evaluate the effectiveness of an action plan. The standard says that the other outputs of the energy review are considered to be a key characteristic. One of those outputs is our prioritized opportunities, right? But I'm not measuring anything. It's just an opportunity on a sheet of paper or in a spreadsheet somewhere. Here we treat it like it's already an action plan, and I'm trying to evaluate its effectiveness. If I never do it, I don't even have to get to that point. So that part's not real clear to me what we had in mind when we put this together. I guess if you're anticipating needing something, some metering or something that might be related to implementing an action plan, then this would at least give you some forward-looking hey, when we do that other project, why don't we include a meter so when we get around to this one over here, we can also, we'll know what it is. I was on the phone this morning with the Cummins plant in Juarez, Mexico, and they got through telling us we're adding a whole nother line to our operations in this area of the plant. We added 5 new air handlers, and they started explaining all this equipment, which is going to affect their model when we get around to including those months. The next question out of my mouth was, can you guess? And they just told me they added on to the plant. Now, I've got all this nice data for the model over here. Did you put meters on that new equipment so we can know what the specific impact is of the addition that it makes? You know what their answer was?
No.
No. Yeah.
So it happens. Real life.
Probably all the time.
Real time. I've heard that John Lennon said it, that life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. That's true in energy management as well. I think last but not least in this form is our actual versus expected consumption. We told you to consider just the gas, so I'm not sure why we put it.
Yeah, just.
I think that's maybe a typo.
Search the topics. Yeah.
There's a lot to think through for the monitoring and measurement and analysis. Again, my starting place is tell me already how you evaluate energy performance. If you have an SEU, chances are they have some way of evaluating its current operations, and I start with that. How do we pull that together to start this measurement plan and get this monitoring, measurement, analysis in place? And then we add on to that only what we need to satisfy the requirements. I don't try to create this thing from scratch on the side and say, oh, by the way, now that you're 50,000, you have all this new extra work to do. Because that's a show killer every time. So the next exercise was then to ask you to take that worksheet, turn it into a measurement plan. This is one concept of a measurement plan. I'll just show it to you. I think we can probably still see it. Can y'all read that? It might be getting a little smaller. That's basically it. So, what is the key characteristic we're measuring? We're managing with this part of the plan. Where is it located? Equipment. What data do we collect? Temperature, gas volume. We don't really probably collect the gas. Well, I guess volume would be correct, but we'd have to convert that to energy, right? So I would prefer if that said we're measuring, gas consumption. Product mass. How often are we going to collect it? Once per shift. So they're taking a meter reading each shift so we can see what's gone past the meter at that point. What about that for the temperature readings?
I felt like you already reminded me.
Well, think about, I don't, there's seasons in your part of the world. There's certainly in the summertime, it can be quite pleasant at 6:30 in the morning when the first shift gets in. It might be 78 degrees. But by 10 o'clock, it's 95 degrees. It's 95 degrees all afternoon. What if they take that reading every morning? Or what if they take it in the hottest part of the day? Or I don't know.
I guess for the event time, they can just use the temperature from the weather station, and if that part is close enough.
It would be, yeah. Better yet would be on the controller for those burners, just to put a thermocouple or something that it's reading and logging for you every 15 minutes. It says once per shift. That would work for the gas. They don't really say what we're collecting the temperature and flow rate. No, yeah, gas, natural gas probably should be an and product flow once per shift. But we don't specify on the temperature, so that's inconsistent too. The operators are supposed to do it, so it's in their procedure to do it. Calibration on the flow meters and the thermocouple. Anyway, that's one. I'm going to show you the one that we actually implemented at Buford. Of course, this one was never audited or, but it would work, I think. Audit. So, first tab is just the overview, explaining what's on all the other tabs. So it's kind of but it also does one thing. It specifies how we're going to define a significant deviation in energy performance and what is going to be the response when that's identified. So this is one place we have a record. How they maintain or follow up on that may be a little problematic since it's just stuck down here in the spreadsheet. It's up to the energy manager really to make that happen. But you can see we have our utility data, SEU data, renewable energy, because they had objectives and they had lots of renewables on site. So we've created a separate category for that. Here's their fossil fuels, the gasoline and diesel, the miscellaneous other stuff that we would look at, our ENPIs and our objectives and targets. So if you look at utility meters, the final version, this was fixed. The yellow just meant we had some follow-up to do. But these are all the gas and electric meters for their utility that they had. This was where we found the 14 missing meters or something.
What is MBU
What?
for the calibration cutoff? MBU, what does MBU stand for?
MBU is, there's a key on here somewhere, managed by utility, I think,
Oh,
maintained by utility.
gotcha.
So the gas meters do need calibration, but because they're utility transfer meters that became not within confines of our energy management system. But we have units, physical location, where the data is stored. And you can actually see that these link to an online repository of meter data at the utility. Then we related these meters to the different measures that they might feed. So if I go to the ENPI tab, you know, row 1 and 5 would be the readings that this meter supplies data for. And that's how we linked that stuff together rather than having these different sections of the spreadsheet. Calibration required, just any other details we might have. Here's the meter number. Here's our significant energy uses. They had 3 SEUs, but here's all the meters they needed to evaluate performance just for their SEUs. Again, because they were doing that at the facility level, anything that required calibration, that should have a yes there, but it's not required by them. Maybe it should be an NA or another MBU we should put. South Carolina Electric and Gas did that calibration. So there's our SEUs. Here's all the meters on their photovoltaics. I wish I'd put in the size, but I don't remember how many total kilowatts they had installed. Here's all the different pumps or meters they had for dispensing fossil fuel, diesel and gas. They had 280 backup generators on the facility. And there was a contractor that went around and just kept all those fuel tanks full. They pulled from the same diesel tanks for the vehicles that they ran. Something interesting I did learn, that when they buy a generator at an air base, they're all bought with the ability to run jet fuel as a backup. Because they have these humongous tanks of jet fuel on base. If they ever got isolated by a hurricane or something, they can keep the base running just with jet fuel. The other was kind of a collection of things. So, one of their ENPIs was MMBTUs per KSF. Remember me saying that? So the square footage, here's where they get the square footage. This is not a meter reading. It was in a spreadsheet that somebody on the base maintained. Their ENPI for their fuel, for their vehicle fuel, was gallons per vehicle or something. It was some kind of index like that. I don't remember exactly. I guess it'd be on our ENPI tab. Anyway, we had to have the number of vehicles in the fleet. That's where they got that. And then with any local weather data, you know you've arrived when your address is the NOAA weather station. They have a NOAA weather station at their airfield. So here's, they had 7 ENPIs they reported. Their SEUs, they had to report E85 fuel consumption, fossil fuel, natural gas, electricity. Their SEU intensity, their air station energy intensity, and the vehicle fossil fuel intensity. 5 and 7 were, mandated reports about the chain of command. This was new, got introduced by the management system. So if I go back to that first meter tab, here's the reference. I said that 1 meter supplied 1 and 5 was the data source for that. What we did on these ENPIs was then put a column that said we have an objective and target that will, that this ENPI will, we expect this to show up in our energy performance indicator. So if I go over here to this objective and target, you'll see that I have an objective for energy intensity that's being measured by this ENPI right here. So that's how we kind of linked all that stuff together for them. And it kind of made the same way to break down. I mean, the industries would never be this complex, just the massive size of the base. This was our way to skin it. You might could do all this on a single page in a spreadsheet, for an industrial plant. Spreadsheets are a great way to do it, but it's not the way you have to do it. It could be in some automated software in another way.
So this is certified under ISO 50.
This is just 50,001, not SEP. If they were SEP, one of their ENPIs would have been the SENPI. I will show you, on the ENPIs, we were trying to get them to do some normalization. What do my notes say? Yeah, that we got a really great model on natural gas. It was awesome. But electricity was terrible because all of those renewables, we didn't have reliable data of what was coming from the electric on the renewables. So, electricity was up and down based on the sunshine, which wasn't in any of the variables we were trying to normalize it. It made it hard. We needed the total of that so we could either add it in or include it as a variable in the way we modeled electricity. And we were trying to turn them onto this concept. I think they got a little overwhelmed by just trying to do the whole management system thing since they weren't doing SEP. We put it down here so it wasn't out of sight. This says in development or review, so if they're audited, these are things they're trying to develop, but these are the actual ENPIs they're tracking.
So this airbase is categorized as commercial buildings, or
Do what?
this is categorized as commercial buildings, or?
In the broad sense, it would be, but it's not going to show up here. I mean, they had aircraft corrosion control facilities that were as energy intense as any industrial building you could ever have. So where they were doing maintenance and more, you know, they had plants or shops on that base that do very energy intense operations. And then they had just barracks, you know, which is beds and lights and washers and dryers and Xboxes and PlayStations. So most of the base is a commercial building. It's either a medical clinic or office building or a school or some kind of training center. Then you had a few others that were very impactful from an energy perspective, but they were really either something to do with the weapons and ammunitions or the aircrafts themselves and maintenance. Did y'all see the movie Top Gun?
Yep.
So I don't know if you remember that scene in that movie, but they go out and do these dogfights, and then they come back into this classroom where they had all these computer screens, and they do this vector analysis for the way they handled the airplane during the dogfight. So we got to go in that. This is like, it's a Top Gun place. It's for the Marine Corps. It probably is Top Gun for the East Coast, I guess. They call it Fighter Town. But when we went in that building, we had to leave our cell phones in a metal mailbox outside the fence of the building. And this building was inside a fence on the base already. And to get through that fence, you put your, like a little P.O. box, like in the post office, you had to leave your cell phone in there before you got in this building. They didn't want you taking any pictures. So, we're going to give you a couple of choices. That's our teaching content for today. I do have a movie I want to show you. Well, I guess I should show you. I guess I should show you these last two slides. The official. No doubt, we talked about this before. Everybody's been through SCP and 50,001, which is they had more meters when they got through. So they put in creative schemes to start trying to expand their ability to monitor, measure, and control systems. Because once they start to see what can happen, it's like, man, if we had better data, we could make better decisions. That's really all saying the same thing, isn't it? Just different ways of saying you can't have enough sub-meters. So it is important, if you're thinking about certification or the exam, to know those highlights of 4.611. What we're monitoring, measuring, analyzing are the key characteristics, and they give you a list of them. So I think when you take the exam, you have 50,001, so it's not like you need to memorize that list, but just know that that's the minimum list of key characteristics. The other things to remember is that it does require a measurement plan and the definition and process for managing significant deviations. Those are the key parts that come out of this in terms of trying to get certified. But they're, to me, the process for defining and following up on significant deviations is so important to the continuous improvement cycle for energy. Let's define the conditions under which we want to think that we might lose control. Let's investigate those and learn, and make the system better. So we were going to give you the option, I guess, of getting the overview of what SCP will look like in 12 months, or 6 months, or a few months.
2 months. Launches in November.
Doing that today, which will help us finish a little earlier tomorrow, or we can finish early
Today.
today and add that on to tomorrow.
Your choice.
What is your current estimate in terms of finishing tomorrow?
Yeah.
3 o'clock.
Yeah, between 2 and 3.
3 o'clock.
So I might try to change my plans. Thank you.
3-ish. So you want to continue today with the update, or do you want to do it tomorrow afternoon?
I'm good with that. Rule for continuing today.
Continue, okay. So today, raise your hands, and then we'll go from there.
Might be the only
Very
one.
How long will this last?
About 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
No,
yeah.
no, the movie's 1 minute. I'm gonna show you the movie just so Deanna really have to be on her toes to entertain us. This is a
And I'll
kind of a
turn the sound up.
docudrama about energy management and how tough it is.
I don't have this sound.
Docudrama?
Docudrama.
This man right here is my great grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family. Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether. Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
That was a Super Bowl commercial a couple years ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's about
Oh, really?
an investment company or something. I stole it, but it's
That was a
like,
good one.
that's how it feels to be an energy manager.
Yeah.
Daily project.
I'll say we're a consultant, I think we all probably could have what we do with
Yeah.
parents.
There's 1,000 occupations considered to be cat herding.
Tomorrow, I'll put up some of the energy management videos I can send you links to that you can use for companies that you'll find particularly useful with management. All right, so I'm going to start at the very beginning. And maybe it doesn't usually take this long to. And that is the changes to the program. And these are the betas that went for approval. So that's why they still have red lines. And I know I'm going to scroll down here. All right. So first thing is we have now something where we're referencing things in months, not years. So you can have a baseline period and then followed immediately by an achievement period, which means you only need a minimum of 24 months of data in order to get certified. So that's one of the first changes. We also have a broader array of timeframes over which you can be certified. So if you do the 1 year, you need a 5% improvement as your initial entry into SEP. The longer you take, up to 9 to 10 years, the higher the number you need to achieve. So your entry level into the program at 3 to 4 years, which right now is currently 5%, is now 7%. And less than 3 years is 5%. And if you go to the 10-year time frame, whereas currently it's 15, it's now 16%. So some of the numbers went up, some of the numbers went down. The other interesting thing about this is that we do have multiple levels available. We now have 2 levels at which you do not have to use the scorecard. That would be bronze and silver. And we have 2 levels at which you do have to use the scorecard, and that would be gold and platinum. So we used to have 6 performance levels, the energy performance pathway and the mature energy pathway, both of which had silver, gold, and platinum. We now have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. So we have 4 options for your clients to utilize. And so at bronze and silver, you do not use it, the scorecard, and at bronze, you only need a 1% improvement in energy performance. So silver, gold, and platinum all would require 5% at the 1 to 2 year mark, and bronze would only require 1%. The next change is that at recertification, currently it's the same requirements that you have when you enter, and now the new requirement is it's 3% for silver, bronze, and platinum, 1% per year, and it is 1% for bronze. So silver, gold, and platinum, it's 3% for your recertification, but for bronze, it's 1%. And the number of scorecard points is in this table. So that's one of the big changes. Another one of the big changes, of course, is the way in which you can do your baseline. And that has been modified as well, so I'm just going to scroll down to that. All right, so you now have a choice of doing your last reporting period or your original baseline period. Those are now your only two choices. Right now you have a considerable breadth of choices that you can choose from. It's an infinite number of choices at the moment. That is no longer the case. You have two. You can either use your previous reporting period or you can use your previous baseline period as long as it is less than 10 years in total. And those are now your only two options. So those are some of the bigger changes in the program. This document now, this certification protocol contains a lot of the basic information on the program and how it is applied. And so it does have a lot of information in it for you and your customers. All right. Then we have our next document, which is 50,021. And it has also been updated. This is now approved and is now the newest version of 50,021 is the 2016 version. It is an approved ANSI standard. And this one doesn't have the pretty front stuff in it. There's a lot of new things in here. This is where you'll find all the definitions relevant to the MMB protocol and the other parts of the program. So the definitions are now all in 21. So you will find a lot of words in here that you will not see in 50,021 because this is where, like in accounting, that is in the MMB protocol. It's not in 50,021. This is the standard. So this is where the terms get defined. So this is why all the terms are here. So that's just kind of FYI. If you want a term definition, it's going to be in 21. Then you have the requirements for scope and boundaries, and then you have your requirements as you see. It follows 50,001. Very similar to what you had before. Very few changes within this text. It's primarily things that relate to the differences in those levels. And the information on facilities address now the opportunity to have what we call multi-site. In the current version that you have, there is not a construct to allow for a corporate program. But in the 2016 version, we have a corporate program. So you can have a corporate with multiple sites under the same certificate concept. So this is how that is addressed. So it's in here.